When we think about human behavior, one of the most fascinating areas to explore is how our brain processes pleasure. Pleasure is not just about feeling good, it's a survival mechanism. From eating food to forming social bonds, our brain is wired to reward us with positive feelings. When we engage in activities essential for survival and well-being, at the center of this process is the brain's reward pathway, which releases a powerful chemical called dopamine. Dopamine motivates us to seek out enjoyable experiences and repeat them, creating habits that can either benefit us or, at times, cause harm. Pornography is one modern example that taps into this same reward system. With just a few clicks, individuals are exposed to endless novelty new images, videos, and scenarios, each one capable of triggering a dopamine surge. This stimulation can be far more intense and frequent than what the brain evolved to handle in natural, face-to-face interactions. Over time, this repeated exposure may begin to reshape the brain's expectations of intimacy, relationships, and even what counts as normal sexual experience. One key thing to understand is neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt based on repeated behaviors. If the brain is consistently rewarded by pornography, the pathways connected to that stimulus can become stronger, making it harder to find the same satisfaction in everyday experiences or real life intimacy. In some cases, this might contribute to issues like decreased motivation, distorted perceptions of sexuality, or difficulty maintaining healthy relationships. But it's important not to approach this topic with fear alone. Pleasure is not inherently bad, it's a natural and necessary part of life. The problem arises when the brain becomes overstimulated, making it difficult to balance pleasure with other aspects of well-being. Understanding how pornography interacts with the brain is less about judgment and more about awareness. When we know how these mechanisms work, we can make more informed choices about our consumption and our habits. It's also worth noting that not everyone is affected in the same way. For some, occasional use may not have significant effects, while for others, the pattern of use can become compulsive. This variation comes from a combination of genetics, environment, mental health, and personal circumstances. By exploring the science, we can better understand these differences and create healthier conversations about pleasure, intimacy, and the digital age. Ultimately, the goal is to bring awareness to how powerful our brain's reward system is, and how modern technologies including pornography can shape it in profound ways. By being mindful of our habits and recognizing the signs of imbalance, we can take steps to ensure that pleasure serves as a positive force in our lives, rather than something that controls or diminishes them. The brain's reward system is one of the most remarkable networks in the human body, because it governs how we experience pleasure, motivation, and reinforcement of behavior. At its core, the reward system is designed to ensure survival by encouraging us to repeat activities that are beneficial, such as eating food, drinking water, forming social bonds, or engaging in reproduction. When we perform these actions, the brain releases certain chemicals that make us feel good. This positive reinforcement creates a cycle. The brain associates the activity with pleasure, and as a result, we are motivated to seek it out again in the future. Central to this system is a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine is often referred to as the feel-good chemical, but in reality, it is more about motivation and anticipation than simply happiness. When dopamine is released in areas like the nucleus accumbens, the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala, it produces a powerful sense of reward and pushes us toward repeating the behavior. This process is not inherently harmful. In fact, it is essential for learning and survival. Without it, humans would lack the drive to eat, nurture relationships, or even pursue goals. However, modern life introduces new kinds of stimuli that can hijack this natural system. Activities such as excessive gaming, scrolling through social media, and consuming pornography can trigger dopamine surges in ways that are much stronger and more frequent than what the brain evolved to handle. Unlike eating a meal or enjoying time with friends, which come with natural pauses and limits, digital sources of pleasure can provide endless novelty. Every click, every new image, or every unexpected stimulus can activate the brain's reward system again and again, creating a loop that is difficult to break. When the reward system is repeatedly overstimulated, the brain begins to adapt through a process known as tolerance. In simple terms, the brain reduces its sensitivity to dopamine. because it is being exposed to such high levels too frequently. This means that over time, the same activity produces less pleasure, leading individuals to seek more intense or frequent stimulation to achieve the same feeling of reward. This mechanism is similar to how addiction works with substances like alcohol or drugs. In the context of pornography, the brain may start to rewire itself to expect constant novelty and high-intensity stimulation, which can make everyday sources of pleasure feel less satisfying. Ordinary interactions, whether eating a meal with family or experiencing intimacy with a partner, may no longer produce the same rewarding feelings. This can result in decreased motivation, difficulty concentrating, and a distorted sense of what normal relationships or sexual experiences should look like. Understanding the brain's reward system is therefore crucial, not only for recognizing how pleasure functions, but also for appreciating how vulnerable it is to modern forms of stimulation. The system itself is not flawed. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, encouraging repetition of rewarding activities. The challenge lies in the environment we live in today, where stimulation is constant, easily accessible, and often far more powerful than anything previous generations encountered. By becoming aware of how the reward system works, individuals can make more conscious choices, set healthier boundaries, and ensure that pleasure remains a positive force rather than a source of imbalance in their lives. Dopamine is one of the most important chemicals in the brain, often described as the messenger that helps us experience motivation, anticipation, and pleasure. When people think of dopamine, they usually imagine it as the substance that makes us feel happy. But in reality, it is more about driving us to seek out rewarding experiences. For example, when we see food after being hungry, when we hear the ping of a message notification, or when we anticipate a positive outcome, dopamine is released in the brain. This release creates a sense of excitement and energy that pushes us to act, to eat, to check the message, or to pursue the reward we are expecting. It is this motivating quality that makes dopamine so central to our behavior and habits. In the context of pleasure, dopamine acts as the link between an action and the sense of satisfaction that follows. Whenever an activity is enjoyable, the brain records it through a burst of dopamine. That burst sends the signal that this activity is worth repeating in the future. This is why certain experiences become habits so quickly. The brain does not just recognize the immediate pleasure, but also remembers the path that led to it, and dopamine strengthens this memory. This system works beautifully for survival-related tasks such as eating, drinking water, or forming close bonds with others. However, it can also create problems when it is overstimulated by modern sources of instant gratification. Pornography is one example of how dopamine can be triggered in ways far more powerful than natural experiences. Each new image or video can produce another wave of dopamine release. And because the brain values novelty, the effect is especially strong. Unlike ordinary intimacy, which involves emotional connection, patience, and gradual build-up, pornography provides an endless stream of stimulation without limits. As a result, the brain can become accustomed to these high levels of dopamine, and over time, ordinary experiences may feel less rewarding. A person may need more variety, more intensity, or longer sessions to achieve the same effect, which is a clear sign of tolerance developing in the brain. This cycle can lead to changes in behavior, mood, and even expectations of real-life relationships. When the brain's natural balance of dopamine is disrupted, people may feel less motivated to engage in everyday tasks, may find less enjoyment in simple pleasures, and may begin to rely heavily on the specific activity that produces the strongest dopamine release. The important thing to understand is that dopamine itself is not the problem. It is vital for survival and learning, but the way it is activated in certain situations can create unhealthy patterns. By being aware of how dopamine works, people can recognize why certain activities are so compelling and learn to manage their habits more wisely. Moderation, mindfulness, and setting healthy boundaries can help restore balance, ensuring that pleasure remains a natural and positive part of life instead of something that overwhelms or controls it. Pornography has a powerful effect on the brain because it taps directly into the natural pathways that govern pleasure, reward, and motivation. In everyday life, our brains are used to experiencing rewards in a balanced way. Eating a meal, spending time with loved ones, or sharing moments of intimacy all provide pleasure. But these experiences have natural limits and pauses. Pornography, however, removes those limits by offering endless novelty, variety, and intensity. With a simple click, the brain is exposed to new images, scenes, and fantasies that can create a strong surge of stimulation. This kind of repeated and limitless exposure is what makes pornography different from most natural forms of pleasure. It has the potential to overstimulate the brain's reward system. At the center of this process is dopamine, the neurotransmitter that drives motivation and reinforces behavior. Each time pornography is consumed, the brain releases dopamine, which strengthens the association between the act of watching and the pleasure that follows. What makes pornography particularly potent is the novelty factor. The brain craves newness, and pornography provides an almost infinite supply of it. Each new video or image can trigger another burst of dopamine, keeping the viewer engaged far longer than real-life interactions would allow. This constant stimulation can overwhelm the brain, leading to an imbalance in how pleasure is experienced. Over time, the brain adapts to this high level of stimulation through a process known as desensitization. Essentially, the brain becomes less responsive to the same level of dopamine, so the individual needs more stimulation or more extreme content to feel satisfied. This can create a cycle where pornography becomes increasingly necessary to achieve the same level of pleasure. While ordinary experiences like physical intimacy, spending time with a partner, or engaging in other enjoyable activities may start to feel less rewarding. This tolerance effect is very similar to what happens in substance addictions, where the body and brain demand higher doses to achieve the same effect. The consequences of overstimulation are not limited to the brain's chemistry alone. They can spill over into everyday life. Some individuals may find themselves less motivated to pursue other goals, such as work, studies, or hobbies, because the reward from those activities feels small compared to the instant gratification pornography provides. Others may struggle in relationships, finding it harder to connect emotionally or physically with a partner. In some cases, expectations about intimacy may become distorted as the brain comes to associate arousal primarily with artificial scenarios rather than genuine human connection. It is important to emphasize that pornography itself is not a problem for everyone, and people respond to it in different ways. Some may use it occasionally without major consequences, while others may fall into patterns of overuse that affect their well-being. The key factor lies in the balance between natural, real-life sources of pleasure and artificial, highly stimulating alternatives. By becoming aware of how pornography can overstimulate the brain, individuals can make more conscious decisions about their habits and take steps to protect the natural balance of their reward system. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change, adapt, and rewire itself based on experiences and repeated behaviors. It is one of the most remarkable features of the human brain, allowing us to learn new skills, develop habits, and even recover from injury. Every time we repeat an action, the brain strengthens the connections between the neurons involved in that activity. This process makes it easier and faster to perform the same action in the future. For example, when someone learns to play a musical instrument or ride a bicycle, the repetition builds stronger pathways until the skill becomes second nature. The same principle applies to habits, whether they are healthy, like exercising, or unhealthy, like overeating or excessive screen time. When it comes to pleasure and pornography, neuroplasticity plays a central role in shaping long-term behavior. Each time pornography is consumed, the brain records the event by strengthening the neural connections that link the activity with pleasure and arousal. Over time, the repeated pairing of pornography with sexual excitement builds a strong pathway that becomes easier and more automatic to activate. This means that the more often pornography is used, the more deeply ingrained the habit becomes. Eventually, the brain begins to crave the stimulus in predictable ways, such as when someone feels stressed, bored, or lonely. The challenge with this kind of habit formation is that it can gradually replace or weaken other natural sources of pleasure. Because the brain is so efficient at adapting, it tends to prioritize the pathways that are most frequently activated. If pornography is used often, the brain may start to rely on it as the primary or preferred way of achieving sexual arousal and satisfaction. This can make real-life intimacy feel less engaging or more difficult, because the neural pathways for natural experiences are not being reinforced as strongly. In other words, the brain learns to expect the instant gratification of pornography rather than the slower, more complex process of building connection and intimacy with a partner. Another important aspect of neuroplasticity is that it does not distinguish between helpful and harmful habits. It simply strengthens whatever is repeated. This is why breaking a habit formed around pornography can be challenging. The pathways that have been reinforced do not disappear immediately. Instead, they weaken gradually when they are no longer used, while new pathways need to be built through healthier behaviors. This requires conscious effort, consistency, and often patience, because the brain's rewiring takes time. On the positive side, neuroplasticity also means that change is always possible. Just as the brain can adapt to form habits around pornography, it can also adapt to form habits that support balance, intimacy, and well-being. By reducing or replacing the behavior, engaging in meaningful activities, building real-life connections, and practicing, individuals can help their brains create new patterns that are more aligned with their goals and values. Recognizing the role of neuroplasticity helps us understand that our behaviors are not fixed. They can be reshaped through awareness, repetition, and deliberate choices. Relationships and intimacy are deeply connected to how our brains experience pleasure and bonding. Human beings are social by nature, and our brains are designed to reward us. When we build meaningful connections with others, simple acts like sharing a meal, holding hands, or making eye contact release chemicals such as oxytocin and dopamine, which strengthen trust, attachment, and emotional closeness. These natural bonding experiences are what make relationships fulfilling and allow intimacy to grow over time. However, when pornography becomes a dominant source of stimulation, it can interfere with these natural processes in subtle but powerful ways. One of the main effects is the shift in expectations. Pornography often presents exaggerated or unrealistic portrayals of sexual experiences, where everything appears instant, flawless, and endlessly exciting. Over time, the brain can internalize these scenarios as a standard. When a person then enters real-life intimacy, the experience may not feel as stimulating or satisfying, because it lacks the novelty, intensity, or constant variety that pornography provides. This mismatch can create frustration or disappointment, not only for the individual but also for their partner, who may feel pressured to live up to unrealistic comparisons. Another issue arises from the way pornography conditions the brain's reward system. Because it delivers quick and powerful surges of dopamine, it can begin to overshadow the slower, more complex rewards of real relationships. Intimacy in real life involves patience, communication, and vulnerability. These are rewarding, but in a different way than the instant gratification of pornography. If the brain becomes accustomed to the latter, it may lose interest in the former, making genuine connection feel like too much effort. As a result, individuals may struggle to fully engage with their partners or may avoid intimacy altogether, leading to emotional distance. This pattern can also affect emotional closeness. Relationships thrive on mutual trust, openness, and shared experiences, but heavy reliance on pornography can create secrecy or shame. A partner may feel neglected, unwanted, or replaced by the behavior, even if that was never the intention. This sense of disconnection can weaken the emotional bond that forms the foundation of healthy intimacy. Over time, it may cause arguments, mistrust, or even the breakdown of the relationship. It is important to note that not everyone experiences these challenges to the same degree. Some individuals are able to separate their consumption of pornography from their real-life relationships, while others find that it has a direct impact on their intimacy. The difference often comes down to frequency of use, the level of dependence on pornography for sexual satisfaction, and the individual's awareness of how it influences their expectations and behavior. The encouraging part is that awareness can make a difference. When individuals recognize how pornography may be shaping their perceptions and interactions, they can take steps to rebuild balance. Prioritizing communication with a partner, creating shared experiences, and focusing on emotional as well as physical intimacy can help restore the natural rewards of real relationships. With effort and mindfulness, it is possible to strengthen connection and intimacy again, ensuring that relationships remain a source of fulfillment and not frustration. Awareness and healthy choices are essential when it comes to understanding how pleasure and pornography affect the brain. Many people go through their daily lives without realizing how strongly their habits are shaped by the brain's reward system. Activities that feel good are often repeated automatically, even when they may not be in line with long-term goals. This is why awareness is the first step toward balance. When individuals become conscious of how their brain responds to certain behaviors, they gain the power to make more intentional decisions, rather than simply reacting to impulses. Awareness involves recognizing the signs of overstimulation and imbalance. For example, if someone notices that ordinary activities feel less rewarding, that concentration is harder to maintain, or that intimacy with a partner has become less satisfying, these could be signals that the brain's reward system is being dominated by one source of stimulation. Identifying these patterns without judgment allows individuals to step back and evaluate whether their habits are truly serving them. It shifts the focus from guilt or shame to curiosity and self-reflection, which are far more effective for making lasting change. Once awareness is established, the next step is making healthy choices that restore balance. This does not necessarily mean avoiding all sources of pleasure. Rather, it means being mindful of how much time and energy are devoted to them. Healthy choices can include setting limits on certain behaviors, finding alternative sources of enjoyment, and building routines that prioritize well-being. For instance, spending more time on physical activity, hobbies, social interactions, or meaningful work can help the brain experience natural rewards that are sustainable and fulfilling. These activities may not deliver the instant surge of dopamine that pornography provides, but they contribute to long-term satisfaction and resilience. Healthy choices also involve nurturing relationships and intimacy in real life. Choosing to invest in open communication, shared experiences, and emotional closeness with a partner can strengthen bonds that no digital content can replace. When these areas of life are given priority, the brain begins to associate pleasure and reward with genuine human connection, helping to rebuild balance in the reward system. Another aspect of making healthy choices is practicing self-control and mindfulness. Simple techniques like setting boundaries on screen time, being intentional about when and why pornography is consumed, or engaging in meditation and reflection can help individuals stay aligned with their values. These practices reinforce the idea that we are not controlled by our impulses, but can choose how to respond to them. Ultimately, awareness and healthy choices empower individuals to take responsibility for their mental and emotional well-being. They remind us that while the brain's reward system is powerful, it is also flexible and adaptable. By paying attention to how our habits shape our experiences, and by deliberately choosing behaviors that support balance, we can ensure that pleasure enhances our lives instead of limiting them. In this way, awareness becomes the foundation for healthier decisions, stronger relationships, and a more fulfilling sense of happiness.